Start recording. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diogo Pinheiro. I'm the Assistant Director for CURCA. And here with me is Alison Grandel. Alison Grandel is the Program Coordinator for CURCA. She runs the show. If you have questions about any of the paperwork and any of the day-to-day stuff, she's the person to contact. And so today we're going to talk about travel grants, specifically the spring cycle for the student travel grants. The spring cycle covers conferences from January until September, right? If it's after that date, you have the fall travel grant cycle. But so this travel grant cycle covers any sort of travel for a conference or something similar, a workshop, a symposium, something like that, that happens before September 30th. And so the main thing to learn from today is that there's one place that you can find all the information that we're going to share today, as well as links to where to apply, which is going to be in our website. So if you go to ung.edu/CURCA, under the For Students button there, you can see the fall spring travel grants. Once you click that, you'll see all of the details and the information that we're going to share today. It's going to be there in detail. And if you're here and you don't really have a conference in mind where you want to present at, if you look there at the presentation opportunities button, there's the undergraduate undergraduate conference opportunities where you can go and find conferences that students have gone to before, right? So on our CURCA webpage, you're going to have a lot of information, right? You're going to see our request for proposals, which is going to have the details of this competition, right? You're going to have the rubric that we're going to use. You're going to even see some of these workshop slides that we're using here. And then most importantly, on that right-hand side, you're going to see that button that says apply for a student travel grant via InfoReady. That's the button that you're going to click when you are ready to submit, right? That's going to take you into InfoReady, where you would submit your paperwork, and once everything is in there and you hit submit, you should receive a confirmation email saying that it's been submitted, right? If you went through InfoReady and you set everything up and you uploaded everything that you have to, and then something happened and you never received a confirmation email, make sure that you go back to InfoReady to make sure that you hit that submit button so that it's in our hands, right? If it's left as a draft and we never see it, unfortunately, we can't do anything about it, right? So the deadline for this semester is January 31st by 11:59 p.m. So not this Friday, the other Friday, right? So that's the deadline for when you have to have all your materials in for this travel grant cycle. And the materials that you have submit for consideration are going to be, first, and perhaps most importantly, a cover letter. This cover letter should be 2 pages maximum, not counting the budget. The budget can go beyond those 2 pages, but it's going to be a 2-page cover letter, standard font, standard margins. Don't try to play around with it to, like, get more stuff in. And so in this cover letter, what we are hoping to see is going to be a description of the conference, right? Is it a national conference, a regional conference, an undergraduate-only conference, a professional conference? A description of your role within that conference, right? Are you the lead presenter? Are you the sole presenter? Are you part of a group that's presenting there? Are you attending as an author but not a presenter, right? The type of conference that you're looking at, whether it's going to be a poster or an oral presentation. And then the biggest thing that you're going to see is going to be that the part that's worth the most in our rubric, as we've seen a little bit, is how this conference presentation will impact your career goals, your long-term professional goals, right? What types of doors will this open to you, right? And then the last thing you have to include in that cover letter is going to be a budget, and that, as I said, the budget can go over the 2 pages, right? If you are part of a research group, if there's going to be more students, each student has to submit their application separately, right? You can send the same abstract or proof of acceptance, but each cover letter has to be individual. It has to be different. In other words, don't just submit the same thing, identical cover letters because you're in the same project, right? You have to write your own cover letter and submit it, and your co-author, your fellow student, has to write their own cover letter and submit it, right? And so keep that in mind, right? We cannot say that the entire team is going to be funded. It's going to be an individual submission that has to be by the own student's hand, right? Like they have to create their own cover letter, and then we evaluate them separately, right? So besides that cover letter, which is going to be the key to what we evaluate, we expect you to submit the abstract that you submitted to the conference. If the conference doesn't require an abstract but requires something else, submit that something else instead. Submit a proof of acceptance. If you don't know if you've been accepted yet or not, provide us with a statement that says, I expect to learn by this date, or I expect to learn by this month, right? And then the last thing, but an important thing, is going to be the student travel authorization form, right? It's going to depend on your department. If your department still uses the original hand-signed form, you have to take that hand-signed form and drop it off at one of our locations, either Dunlap 108 in Dahlonega or Administration 111 in Gainesville, with ink. In other words, don't just photocopy it. So if your department, if your mentor, they use DocuSign, use DocuSign to get that student travel authorization signed and have us get a copy. If your department uses still the old kind of hand-signed student travel authorization, make sure that it's in on that Friday where everything's due by 3 p.m. Dunlap 108A in Dahlonega, Gainesville 111 in Administration 111 in Gainesville, right? So the student travel authorization form is going to look like this form here on the right. Understand that the form is going to ask you about costs, and it's okay if you don't have a kind of like finalized costs, right? Maybe you haven't booked your hotel yet, maybe you haven't booked your plane tickets yet. We just want to have kind of a general sense there, right? Of lodging, transportation, meals, registration fees, other, and the total there. When you're entering those costs, since we know that they are going to be estimates, it's better to guess high than to guess low, right? If you tell us that you're going to spend $100 on lodging and you end up spending $300 on lodging, we might not be able to get you to that 300 in lodging, right? It's better to estimate high and have money left over than estimate low and not have everything covered, right? Keep in mind that both you and your mentor will have to sign this form, right? So make sure that you are in contact with your mentor so that they know that they have to sign this, right? Don't wait until, oh, it's Friday at 11 p.m. Oh, now I have a signature. Where am I going to find my mentor, right? So talk to your mentor earlier. And if you're going to have multiple funding sources, perhaps your department is pitching in, perhaps you're another students, etc. Make sure that a representative for that department is also signing your student travel authorization, right? So there's going to be a little bit of a must, explanation of how your presentation benefits UNG. It doesn't have to be like a super specific thing. It can be just like, you're going to demonstrate all the great works that are being done at UNG or something along those lines, right? But the key thing is that we need that student travel authorization form signed either via DocuSign or in ink by that deadline, right? So in terms of how we select who's going to get a student travel grant, here I must emphasize, and this is a very important thing to understand, that it is a competitive process. Some years we're going to have enough money to cover everybody, but other years we won't. And it is going to be based on what the reviewers say to us about what you've submitted, right? If you submit a couple of sentences and you don't really put a lot of effort into it, there's a good chance that you're not going to get funded at all, right? And so it's important to keep that in mind, right? Even if you're just asking for $5 to cover parking, you're still going to be in competition with every other proposal. And the competition is not related to how much money you're asking, right? Whether you're asking for $5 or for the full $500, we create a ranking of all the submissions based on this rubric, right? There's going to be 5 criteria in this rubric, and we're going to go over them in detail. But again, it's important to keep that in mind when you're writing your first submission, right? The process that we have is this. You're going to submit your stuff to us. We're going to take that stuff. It's not going to be me making a decision. We're going to send your submissions to our reviewers. Our reviewers will have this rubric to evaluate you. And based on this rubric, they'll give you a certain number of points, right? So it's very important for you to write to this rubric, right? Because it's what's going to be used to evaluate you. If there's an item in this rubric here that you did not address, you get a 0 for that item, right? And so the 5 categories here, the 5 things that we're looking for here are going to be the impact of representation, the student participation, the type of conference, academic and professional development, and budget, right? So impact of presentation, it's going to be about whether the conference is a national or international conference, a regional conference, a local conference, right? Even if it's obvious to you, you still have to say it in your application, whether it's regional, national, local, right? If you don't say that, our reviewers are instructed to give you a 0, right? Our reviewers are not going to Google something that you don't say, right? So make sure that you include that in your cover page. The student participation is also important. Again, don't make the reviewer guess, because if the reviewer has to guess, they'll just give you a 0, right? You can see here on the rubric score, right? If the student does not discuss his or her role in the project, it's a 0, right? So say, are you going to be the sole presenter, one of many? You're going to be a secondary author. Make sure that you are clear in what your role is. The type of conference, is it the professional conference? Is it an undergraduate only conference? Is it the undergraduate only portion of a professional conference? Make sure again that you say that. And then the academic development, academic and professional development, that's worth twice as much as every other item in the rubric. And this here is something that you should really give some thought to. Why is this important to you? Oh, this is important to me because it's a way for me to demonstrate that I have research experience and I want to apply for graduate school. Okay, that's fine, right? If it's just like, oh, I'm really interested and I think it's a fun thing to do, it's not gonna score as well, right? So make sure that you give a thought out response to why this is important to your future. And then the budget, you have to submit an itemized budget, and that itemized budget has to show that you've put in some work already, right? So we want to see evidence in that budget. It doesn't have to be, a printed receipt from your airline, but we want to see that, hey, I look at the hotel, and to stay at this hotel, it's going to cost this much for these many nights, right? Because the idea here is that this gives us confidence that you looked up how much it's going to cost to be at that conference, right? If you just guess and you throw some random numbers, we don't know if you're going to follow through, because maybe it's actually going to cost $3,000 and you're asking for 200 and you're not going to go, right? So have a detailed budget with evidence, and by evidence here, information that's detailed that shows us that you've looked for stuff, right? So to talk a little bit about the budget, you're supposed to include all your expenses, even if they go above $500, right? We can only reimburse you up to $500, but we want to see everything in the budget, even if it goes beyond, because among other things, it also allows us to go and ask for more money in the future to say, hey, we should have more than $500, right? So what we can cover is registration. We cannot cover the membership to an association, but we can cover the registration for a conference. We can cover lodging, but again, it has to be hotels only. We cannot reimburse Airbnb, VRBO, any of these kind of new apps where you stay in someone's bedroom or something like that. None of that is permissible. It has to be hotels only. We can cover a car rental, but only if it's through Hertz or Enterprise, and it will have a few different things that you have to keep in mind there. We can cover airfare, but only the base ticket, right? Don't go getting a first class or something like that. Uh, Transportation, mentioned that if you're carpooling or not. We have mileage reimbursement rates. It's 70 cents per mile. And so that mileage will cover both gas and wear and tear. And the last and perhaps more important thing that you may not be familiar with is going to be meals. We don't reimburse meals based on the receipt from the restaurant. We reimburse meals based on what we call a per diem rate, right? So the way that it works is that the per diem is going to be an amount that we're going to reimburse you for your food and incidentals for that day. And that per diem is going to be the same whether you ate a couple of crackers in your hotel room or whether you went out for a five-star dinner, right? So the way that you're going to find your per diem rate, you go to the U.S. General Services Administration and you find the location where you're going to be, and then there's going to be your meal incidentals total here. That's going to be your per diem rate, right? You're going to look at that, and you're going to adjust for first and last day of travel, right? So you're going to get your per diem from this website, adjust for first and last day of travel, because first and last day of travel, it's a 75% of the daily rate, and you're going to see that for Georgia only, if you're going to travel in state, the per diem is a flat $50 daily rate. If the conference that you're going to is going to be providing meals, there's going to be a way for you to adjust that later. But again, keep this in mind. One thing that's important to understand, we can only provide you with a per diem if you're staying overnight at your destination. If it's a conference where you go in the morning and you come back home at night, we cannot give you a per diem, even if you've had to spend out of pocket to eat at the location. So in terms of how to deal with this budget stuff, and I know it can get complicated, well, Alison Grindell that's here with us, she's the expert. She's the one who can help you kind of with any kind of tricky questions that you might have, right? So if you win the travel grant, before you travel, talk to Ms. Grindell within our office to make sure that you have all the reimbursement paperwork, that you have everything that you need so that once you come back, you can be reimbursed, right? Keep your receipts for everything except food, right? If you win the travel grant. So food is just taken care of by the per diem, but save the receipts from your hotel, parking receipts, Uber, Lyft, registration receipts, right? And then your hotel receipt will have to show a zero balance at the end of the receipt, right? And so once we have all of that in hand, make sure that you have to submit your reimbursement after the travel. You have to submit your reimbursement within 2 weeks of your presentation, right? So you present today, 2 weeks from today is the deadline for you to submit all your paperwork to get reimbursed. And then you're going to work with our office to make sure that you have the right reimbursement form, the right vendor form, and etc. And so that we can make sure that you are reimbursed for your expenses, right? So in terms of a few details that you might and questions that you might have, the travel grants are only available for current students. In other words, if you've already graduated or if you're looking for a conference that's going to be way after your graduation, right? Maybe you're graduating in May and you're talking about a conference in late September. Unfortunately, we can't cover those students. We might be able to cover students that are like within a little bit of time of their graduation, but primarily we fund current undergraduate students of UNG, right? So if you're going to be a senior and you're graduating this May, and you have a conference that's after your graduation, contact us so that we can figure out if it's too late or if we can still cover it, right? The other thing to keep in mind is that we reimburse up to $500. We're not giving you $500, right? If you win the travel grant, we're not just going to go and give you the $500. Here's $500, right? What's going to happen is that if you win the travel grant, you're going to go on and travel to your destination, do your conference, present your work, and then when you come back, we're going to reimburse you to the extent that we can, up to $500, right? So it's not a get $500 and celebrate type of thing, right? In terms of the estimates that you're going to be entering for the costs, there is no advantage to you to guess on the lower end. When we are ranking applications, we're not taking into consideration how much money was asked, right? So don't try to lowball your estimates thinking that's going to make it easier for you. Because if anything, it will make it worse, because if you say that your travel is going to cost $300 and we select $300 for you, if you come back later and you say, oh, actually it costs $800, $300 is all that you're going to get, right? So when the costs that you estimate are going to be the maximum that you can get, up to $500, right? So keep that in mind. How do you know if your conference is local, state, regional, or national? First, you can ask your advisor. They'll have a good sense. But second, it's generally going to be kind of obvious given the scope of the conference, right? If you're going to be going to the National Conference of Undergraduate Research, well, it's a national conference, right? If you're going to go to the Southeastern Psychological Association, Southeast is a region, right? So if you're in doubt, ask your mentor, but it should be fairly straightforward, right? If you haven't been accepted yet to your conference, just tell us when you expect to receive that acceptance. And you can apply to more than one conference at the same time, right? But keep in mind that the $500 limit is per academic year, right? So if you apply for one conference and then you apply for another conference, you have two applications in, and both of them are asking for $500. We cannot give you 1,000 if both are funded. The limit per student is still $500 per academic year, right? And finally, if you are awarded a travel grant, but you cannot no longer travel, let us know so that we can rearrange the money that reallocate those funds to other students. So to review this a little bit before we go into a Q&A, you apply online via InfoReady by January 31st. You have to submit a cover letter, the abstract or artistic submission, or letter describing the application process. You have to submit your proof of acceptance or a statement saying when you expect to be notified, and the copy of the student travel authorization form. If your department uses the hard copy version, make sure that you drop one off at our offices. If you use the DocuSign version, make sure that we have a copy of that. If you have any other questions that are not covered by our website or by us here today, send an email to curca@ung.edu. So thank you all. We're going to stop the presentation here now, and now we can turn it over to your Q&A.